Hi, it's Dre Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Today I'll be answering the question, how can I put my IRA into a trust? When this question comes up, is usually two things that the person's considering. One is they're trying to consider what is the tax implication? Is this a good idea? Is it going to lower my taxes? Is it going to help me? Or is it going to increase my taxes? The second question is, can I do this to make sure that my money lasts a little longer with my kids, make sure that they're responsible with the money? Both of these questions will be answered within the overall question of today. Most entrepreneurs and families worry about money, so we created the Wisdometric framework to help you eradicate financial stress, generate a passive income, and build a prosperous retirement strategy. So let's start answering this question from the perspective of my taxes. Like, is this going to save me money? Is this going to help me? Does this make sense? And the short answer is it's not going to lower your taxes in most situations. Now, there is a small chance just in the way that maybe the attorney or your CPA structures the overall trust. But when we design the trust together, basically keeping your plans and your thoughts in mind, you can't just say, okay, I want to turn my IRA. And when I say IRA, I mean any of the IRAs. We could be talking about the SEP IRA, the simple IRA, the Roth, the traditional IRA, right? Any one of those. You can't just turn your IRA into a trust. And so as a result, the only way you can turn your IRA into a trust is by making the trust your beneficiary. As long as your trust is your beneficiary, then you'll be okay, in the sense that I could say, okay, when I pass, instead of my beneficiaries being like my spouse or my kids or like my favorite dog, right, whatever it is, I'm going to make it Griggs Family Trust. So all the money's going to go inside of the trust. Now, there's different rules in the code as far as the way Uncle Sam feels about an inherited IRA, an IRA that basically once the person who originated it passes, because again, the I in IRA is individual. So it is your individual IRA. So if you put your beneficiary as a trust instead of like your spouse or really just your spouse, whether you put your beneficiary as your trust or your kids, the way the IRA is considered is their Uncle Sam is going to say, okay, this is a non-spouse transfer. And that has different tax implications than if it was a spouse transfer. If you transferred your IRA to your spouse, they have the ability to roll some or all of that into their own IRA, and then they wouldn't have to worry about the overall required distributions until 72, because the Secure Act that was passed in 2019, it changed the required distribution amounts from 70 and a half to 72 they have to start. So if you're the spouse and it's a traditional transfer to your spouse, well, your spouse can roll it and then they don't have to take any money out until they're 72, unless you're already in your required distributions. And what I mean is you were already over 72. So Uncle Sam already forced you to start taking money out of your IRA so that Uncle Sam can start getting his taxes. Uncle Sam said he's not playing with us. That he doesn't want us to be responsible and to take our time so that we limit our taxes. Uncle Sam wants us to take the money out so Uncle Sam can start getting the money. Remember, this is, for most of you, your traditional IRA is going to be a tax deferred account. So Uncle Sam is waiting. Now, if the money was in a Roth, well, that was already after tax money. So Uncle Sam's already taxed it, so he doesn't have the same required distributions. But if it's in your traditional IRA or any tax deferred where you haven't paid taxes yet, Uncle Sam wants the money. So if you have that ability where you were to pass it on to your spouse, well, your spouse has a lot more leeway on making sure they limit the taxes based on how they take the money out. But if you are a non-spouse, which your trust would be considered a non-spouse, right? Your trust or your kids, any beneficiary that's not your spouse, well, the Secure Act of 2019 changed it to where instead of it being treated just like if it was a spouse, what I mean is you can kind of roll over some of it, take your time taking the money out to limit your taxes. Right now, most of you are going to have only a 10-year span. So you have 10 years to figure out how you're going to take the money out. And that is going to put some of you at risk because of the amount of money that you may have in your IRA. to where if you have to take it out over 10 years, that is going to increase your taxes because you're going to have more income. So if your trust falls within some sort of span like that, where they have to move it within 10 years, whether they just claim it in as income and then they roll it into something else, whether they take it as a large lump sum or whether it just kind of gets transferred to however from one hand to the other hand, Uncle Sam is going to tax that transfer as if it was income. And then that gives you the risk of having a higher tax bill because you only have 10 years anyways. But then depending on how you structure it, you're going to have to pay more in taxes than if you just kind of left it alone. So it really depends. For the most part, it's not going to give you that tax benefit just because of the way some of the laws have changed. It doesn't mean that it can't work for you. It just means that it's probably not going to work for that benefit. Now, if your second question is, can I make sure that my kids are taken care of a little bit longer? Can I make sure that, I have some kids that are responsible and I have some kids that are irresponsible with money. I have some kids that are older and I can trust with the money, and I have some kids that are a little bit too young right now. I have special needs kids, and so I have a caretaker, and I want to make sure that the caretaker isn't using the money irresponsibly. However, whatever one of those concerns that you're thinking of, yes, a trust would be able to help you with that. You can have the money transferred into a trust, and then the caretaker for your special needs kids, they would be able to only use the money in certain increments per year or for certain activities where it can only be spent on certain things. And outside of that, they won't be able to spend the money. Also, if you're worried about an irresponsible kid versus responsible kid, you can have it structured where the responsible kid gets the money and they can kind of do whatever they want with it. And then you can have the irresponsible kid where they have to use the money for certain things. They have to do certain milestones in their life to show that they're being more responsible. And then they can have access to the money. That is totally fine. You have that choice. You also could say, okay, well, my kid is, 15 or 16 or really young, and I just don't want them to have all of that money right away. Well, that's fine. You can say, you know what, the kid will get this amount of money at 15, they'll get this amount of money at 20, they'll get this amount at 25, or when they get their first job or they graduate from college or they finish the military. Whatever it is you want your kid to do to convince you that they're responsible with the money, you can design your trust to do that. You have that opportunity. So if your goal is just to make sure that the money is used responsibly, then the trust is for you. You'll be able to just put Greg's Family Trust as the beneficiary, and then you have the trust designed with the rules for them to be able to access the money whatever the way that makes the most sense in your opinion. I'm a big proponent of your trust should convey your values. If your family values are family and nonprofit and charitable work, well, design your trust where they get the money based on their work that they do in nonprofits. If you're big on entrepreneurship, then design the trust where your kids have to work in the business or start a business or something like that. And if you just want your kids to be responsible with the money, then you can just design it based on that. I've had clients that their kids had to join the military, and then their kids joined the military. They finished maybe the first 4 years, and then they were able to have access to the money. They just felt like the military was a core value of theirs in service, and they were able to and they believed that the military would help the kid to be responsible for when the money came to them. And so you have those options. If you are someone who needs more help and has more questions about your retirement plan, I invite you to check out my free retirement planning that works video training at obsidianwisdom.com/training. In it, I'll give you the entire Wisdometric framework that you can use that I use with my clients to help them eradicate financial stress, generate a passive income, and build a prosperous retirement strategy. Until next time, Wisdomites, and by that time, hopefully I have my voice all the way back. Remember, wisdom is asking the right questions to allow yourself to get the right answers. Keep asking those questions and you will keep getting those answers. Continued blessings.